Hi, please join me as I recall some stories of when we cruised Brazil in our 39-foot monohull called Sirius. So we already did Salvador and Jacare. So I can remember when we were on our way from Jacare into Maceió. The, uh, the weather was fine and everything went quite okay. And one night I just saw this light out there. We were probably 80, 90 miles offshore. And I told my wife, I said, you better come and have a look. I don't know what's going on. And man, when we got close, it was an awesome sight. There was this lone fisherman that was standing on what I can only describe as a dining room table-sized yacht. I don't know if you can call it that. It had this pole up with which looked like a piece of linen as a sail, and he was struggling with what looked to be probably a 10 horsepower outboard. And we shouted at him, and he just showed, no, everything is fine, I'm okay. And you know, we were out there and the swell was running probably about a meter or so, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was just, some of the Brazilians, what they get up to is just astonishing. I mean, these guys really go out there um, and with these little things. And I know that there's a specific name in Brasileiro for that, but I've now forgotten. If you know, please leave a comment. No, it was the next day. This trip was actually full of excitement. The next day, we uh, we heard a lot of stories, by the way, about orcas and how bad orcas can be for you. The book was out, I think, called 114 Days Offshore, and that spoke about an orca going through a monohull yacht made of glass fiber, and she sank within like 2 or 3 minutes. And mum, dad, and I think two kids found themselves on a life raft, and that's the story of their survival. So, if you want to, please check that out. So we were going along, and it was quite a nice day. We had a visit from about 200 dolphins, and all of a sudden I saw just this weird patch in the water. You know, if you're out there for such a long time, your eyes get so used to and accustomed to pick up everything that's moving in the ocean. And again, I called my wife and I said, "Hey, you better come and have a look. This doesn't look right at all. I have no idea what it is." It's another identified object. And yeah, she came out and we looked at it both, and both of us at the same time saw the black and white. And we screamed, "Orca, orca." And this thing was literally coming closer to us. I mean, I became white-knuckled on the helm, on the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. I was standing there all stressed up, waiting for the wah as this thing would hit the hull of the boat. Now, we had a ferrocement boat, but still, you know, you have no idea what kind of damage this is going to cause. And heaven forbid, it might just take off your rudder, and then you're out there without any control. So I had no idea what was going to happen. My wife was hanging over the side, man, and this orca came up, and they looked at each other, probably about 3 meters apart, looked at each other eye to eye, and the orca dived down. I thought to myself, oh man, here we go. And nothing happened. Fortunately, nothing happened. It was pretty scary. The Some of the other stories is all about food, but they're all interesting. In Brazil, nobody seems to talk English. We had a little dictionary, and you know, with the pronunciation, like for example, a key. You don't know how it's pronounced, so it's difficult for you to to see what it is. It's actually just here. Aquí means here. We in Salvador we had this people, and they were trying to tell me a key. And the waitress, she also tried to explain to me that tomorrow night you must be here at 5 o'clock. And we eventually got that. But, you know, he went a key, a key, a key, a key. When I read that for the first time, I thought, and it was next to a shop, there was this commercial that said something and then a key, like AQUIE. And I thought it meant IQ, you know, like in English. It's IQ, so you need to stand in a queue. So we found Brazil actually quite funny and quite interesting, and a wonderful place, actually, and wonderful, wonderful people. We, uh, we went into this one restaurant, and we were quite hungry. And I told my wife, I said, well, let's have a look at the menu. Again, all in Brasileiro, man, no English menus around. So we had a look, and we were working our way through this. And, you know, well, being cruisers, you don't have a lot of money. So you're always looking for a bargain or a special. And I looked, and this one said burger kind of something. And I caught up, you know, that's it. A burger sounds cool. Whatever the trimmings, I don't care. So that, and it was pretty cheap, 14 reais, which in South African terms was 7 rand. Now that's probably about 50 American cents. So that was quite a bargain. So we pointed at the menu, and the waiter said, yeah, cool. And we waited a while, and along came the food, and lo and behold, it looked like a burger. It had a patty in there, and it had the buns on top. There was some side salad and some chips, and it looked awesome, man, lovely. And we started eating, and it went all fine. And, you know, I tasted the burger, and I told my wife, I said, well, it's interesting, you know, that they put sugar in the meat because it's quite sweet. And we just kept on going. And man, the waiter came past, and he looked at us and he said, horsey, horsey nice. And I literally went, oh. Where I'm from, we have horses as pets. We don't eat them. And yeah, that was quite a shock. But, you know, it shows you, like, let's look at this from a psychological point of view, as I always do. We grow up in a culture where we are told that some things are taboo to eat or some things aren't, and all of that stuff. Like snakes and crocodiles, you don't eat that stuff. Australians do, apparently. I don't think all of them do, actually. Um, the psychological thing then about that is it gets into your mind, and for your mind, that becomes taboo. And that's exactly what happened in that moment. When I realized what I was eating, it was all the emotional stuff. It was more emotional than physical. It's just meat, man. It's just sweet meat. That's all it is. And that's what I told my wife. However, when he told me what I was eating, all of that emotions, all of the booze, all of that stuff just hit me in one shot. And that is why I had such a severe reaction. We were in Jacare, and we started making friends. And, you know, they couldn't understand us, neither could we understand them. But it was okay because those people are so friendly. It's just amazing. So with hand gestures and stuff, we realized that they said they're going to take us out to lunch. So, you know, off we went in this guy's bakkie and stuff. And we came into this restaurant. Man, it was fancy and quite nice. And I thought to myself, wow, do we have enough money for this? And there were these huge tables, the long tables. Looks like in the old Viking movies, you get those long ones where they sit and they have all these wonderful barbecue stuff. Man, and that's the first thing that caught my eye was barbecue. And everywhere it was this fires and pits of barbecuing going on. Like in South Africa, braai. I mean, this was a huge braai, man. And yeah, I looked at this lot, and then we were seated at this table, but the place was chock-a-block full. It was in the afternoon. And I sat there, and the plates were huge, man. They were like that size. I thought to myself, well, I can pack it away. I don't care. Bring it on. And the waiters, they would walk around with these huge, like society, we call it society sticks, the long, long ones, skewers. That's also called skewers. And they'll have this huge knife, and they'll take this thing, put it in your plate, and just start slicing. And it was full of meat, like the Portuguese people normally do that on the spit, but that's quite larger. This was just a smaller portion of that. And they would cough, 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 and they were showing me, you must say stop. And then I showed the waiter, I said, that's fine, looked at my plate. There's a huge huge amount of wonderful red meat. So, man, I packed it away. I didn't care. And my wife said, I wonder if there's sides or anything. It doesn't look like it, because everybody that was sitting there was just having plates and plates of meat. And then I started watching, oh, that's probably beef that guy has. That, I don't know what that is. And it eventually turned out to be goat, which was nice. And then you have lamb, and he walks around with lamb, and then chicken wings and all kinds of stuff on these skewers. And I was like, whoa, what's that? And the guy showed me, they said, hey, you must just ask him to come here and to cut. And that's what I did. I said, hey, I like that one, come here, cut. Man, that went on for a long, long time. And eventually, I got it in my mind, and I told my wife, I said, so what are these green and red things here? It was these little funny stuff. And on that side, it was like white. And I saw the one guy that was over there was quite a smallish guy. So he already ate a lot. So he turned the stuff. And then the waiters were walking, and nobody got to him. They got to the guys next to him. And then I realized, man, so if you don't want any food anymore, you just turn the stuff onto white or to red or whatever. But you no green. If it shows any green, they're just going to come and cut. And that was it. That was just this feast that you can eat as much as you wanted to. And with that, we drank Coca-Cola. They purchased 2 liters full of Coca-Cola, and they poured each one a glass, and that's what you had, meat and Coca-Cola. What a wonderful pleasure that was. We also went to a restaurant, and again, Brasileiro menu, and the waiter came, and, what are you going to have? And we had a look, and we just said, yeah, that looks okay. Whatever, dude. Then, because we learned one word, and that's carne. So that's meat. So you just go cerveza, carne, which is beer and bread. Which is beer and meat. So with those 2 words, you're fine. You're going to get something nice. So he came along, and these were these big, looks like balloons, man. That's the only way to describe it. Like white stuff, like balloons. And we cut it, and when you open it up, it was all the stuff that was inside, and all kinds of weird colors and what have you, and it didn't smell that wonderful either. But when in Rome, so we started eating that, and then I took my dictionary, and I really started looking up these words. And then it turned out that we were sitting there eating out of a goat's stomach. that whole balloon thing is like a goat's stomach. And inside is oval and stuff. So we're not great into oval at all. I eat everything on this Mother Nature's earth. But there's one thing that I don't eat anymore, and that's oval. And also chicken liver pate, but I'll tell you that story soon. So that was the other thing that was amazing is we went to a beach in Brazil. And these kids, they're probably between 13 and 20 years old. They'll walk around with these tins, and in that tin there are coals. And they've got this little, what we call a barbecue grit, a braai grit, on there. And they'll take cheese, the thickish, white, firm cheese. And then when you call them over, they'll put that on to that grit, and they will barbecue, braai that cheese. And that was to die for. Man, that was just to die for. And the cerveza, the skull, and we had the bottles of beer with us on the beach. And I'll just have a beer and have this cheese. And that was so, so awesome. Then, unfortunately, it was time for us to say goodbye to Brazil. We found ourselves in Fortaleza, which is right in the northern end of Brazil. And we stayed for 6 months. We wanted another extension, but they said, no, it's time for you to go now, because we had a 3-month visa, and then we extended that to 6 months. I mean, what a pleasure. If I could have stayed longer, we would have. Brazil was awesome, really, really awesome. And if Brazilians ever see this video, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your hospitality and all the wonderful memories. Then for us, it was on to Trinidad. We didn't know that as yet, because our plan was to go to French Guiana and go to Devil's Island. And a lot of cruising people do that. And they also go to Manaus in the Amazon. So that was the plan. So we set off. And then when we got pretty close to the Amazon basin, we quickly realized we're going to have a big problem there. The Amazon comes out at 6 knots, and our top speed was about 4.5. So you go back for the tide to change all the way. If you're against the tide, you lose all the miles, and then when the tide takes you again, you go forward. But that psychologically gets to you. So we decided, nah, we can't do this. So when we headed out into deeper water, away from Manaus, we started exploring our options. And I told my wife, I said, probably just Trinidad direct. So we were okayish planned for a trip that would have been probably 6 or 7 days. And then Trinidad, from Fortaleza to Trinidad, that was 16 to 18. It eventually did take us 18 days to get to Trinidad. On our way, I shouted down at my wife and I said, you must quickly come. Something is eerie and unbelievable. And she came up and she said, what's going on? I said, listen to that. It's like a jet engine. It's like a Boeing. I mean, this sound, it's like a swarm of bees or whatever. And I told her, I see nothing. I just see ocean, miles and miles of ocean. And she looked at this and she said, I have no idea where this sound is coming from. And then you start looking around for UFOs and stuff, because it is that uncanny. And then we both saw it again. And I showed her, I said, look at the blue and look at the green. There was this green pea soup water. It was literally green pea soup with the blue of the ocean. And those two were rubbing and clashing against each other. It was these two tides and these two discolored water that was meeting each other and making this unbelievable noise. That's the Amazon coming out, man, at force against the tide. And that is the tide line that you see. Awesome, awesome sight. The green piece of water you can see is literally full of life. It's all over the show, and there was small fishes jumping and going crazy. And the blue, nothing. It was just light blue gin water, like always. So that was astonishing. We were about 10 days into that trip. And then I was down there, and it was my turn to make some food. And the gas didn't work at all. And I thought to myself, man, it can't be the gas bottle. We filled up both of them. So it's not that. And I started investigating, and then I saw our gas regulator, when it's just pewter. And that thing was just so corroded, it just fell in. So we didn't have a regulator at all. And I didn't have an idea what to do and how to get a gas stove to work without a regulator. And I was just too scared to do it without one. So we were pretty stuck. So that was the only means that we could make any kind of hot food. And I told my wife, I said, I've got no idea now, but out there you make a plan. we had fire buckets. So I took all the sand and just threw it out. And in our little small cockpit in the mornings, I'll sit there. I had some barbecue braai wood that I took from South Africa. A friend of mine said, man, you guys are going to cross an ocean. I think you're going to die. So please, before I can allow you to go cruising, do me a favor. Take some South African brandy with you, if it's going to be cold and wet, and take some firewood. And I had 2 bags. So we would make a fire in that bucket in the cockpit. And then we'll have lots of coffee, and followed by like hot pasta for breakfast. And it was quite nice, nothing wrong with that, because we know lunch is going to be cold pasta, and then tonight it's going to be something else, because I couldn't, I had to ration my amount of wood. And I already said in earlier videos, I said that when we varnished our tins against the rust, we took off all the labels, and with the permanent cokie, we varnished the tins and then we used the permanent cokie. By the way, it should be the other way around. You should first use the cokie and then varnish over that. So that cokie didn't last. So we had tins which we had no idea what the content was. But we knew that those little small ones was chicken liver pate. And we had a whole tray full of that stuff. We had 48 tins. Man, and we had some salty crack biscuits, these small little salty biscuits that we purchased in Brazil. So for either lunch or supper, we'll sit there and you'll get your little tin, like in the army. You get your little tin of this chicken liver pate, and you get the little salty crack stuff, and you sit there, and that was supper or lunch. That is why, up to this day, that is something that I still cannot eat. I've had too much of that, thank you. The next stop was then into Trinidad, into the Boca. It's been quite a long video, and if you are still here, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you as I continue the Caribbean adventure. Have a great day.